Hey Wellness Warriors, welcome to another episode of the Wellness Revolution. I'm your host, Dr. Milen Riobe, and in today's episode, we're going to be talking about why corporate wellness programs don't stop burnout and what actually works. So burnout is a massive problem, not just here in the US, but increasingly all over the world. Canada's feeling it, Europe is feeling it. And while corporations understand that burnout is a huge problem and they throw a ton of money at it with corporate wellness programs, we're quickly realizing that these programs aren't working to stop burnout. Why? Because unfortunately, they treat it as just an isolated mental health issue or a workload situation, when in fact, burnout is so much more than that. Burnout is a complete mind and body metabolic catastrophe. And until we recognize that and treat that, burnout will continue to be a major, major problem for corporations, their team members, their executives, and for the consumers because burnout drives prices up. 24% of employees say that they believe that their corporate wellness program helps them with burnout. That means 70% don't think their wellness programs are helping them with burnout. 50% of employees say that they don't believe that their corporations are helping them with burnout. It's a massive problem. And today we're going to talk about solutions that work. Traditional wellness programs focus on mental health as a solution to burnout. And while this is an important part of helping with burnout, the majority of burnout is actually a physical problem and not a mental or emotional problem. And so burnout runs deep into the body. It's not just simply the stress of the workplace. It's actually the interior of every individual's body on a cellular level that creates and perpetuates the burnout problems that we're experiencing today. So while it's true that mental and emotional traumas and stress are a part of burnout, they simply are not the solution. And this is why we see the vast majority of corporate wellness programs are not really even putting a dent in burnout. 60% of employees say that burnout is affecting their productivity. 84% of employees know that burnout is affecting them in multiple ways. And burnout costs U.S. corporations over $190 billion just on healthcare costs alone. That doesn't even include absenteeism, turnover, increased cost of doing business due to those things. The cost of burnout is rapidly approaching $1 trillion or more per year. Traditional wellness programs tend to focus on exercise and stress reduction, yoga, gym memberships. They do some focus on nutrition. However, these strategies just seem to be spitting in the wind. Without a deep dive into metabolism, we'll continue to spin our wheels and get nowhere on the topic of burnout. Burnout is not just a workplace situation. It's a huge risk for chronic diseases later in life, a shortened lifespan, and reduced joy in life. And that's just not why we're here on planet Earth. We're here to enjoy our lives. Work is something we should do with vibrant energy. We should be working somewhere that we want to support. We should be somewhere where we want to support the customers that come through our businesses. We want to support our team members and our team leaders because we believe in what the corporation is doing. We believe that it's bettering our society and improving our lives in some way. And that includes as an employee, right? You don't want your solution just to be good for the end user. You want it to be good for everybody all the way through that assembly line from beginning to end. And so team members are critical. And unfortunately, our metabolism gets directly eroded by stress. Now, we all understand that we're not just going to go skipping into work and, be laughing and smiling and joking the whole day and, not have some stressors, right? Every day I go into work, there are stressors, right? People come in, they're not feeling well, right? And sometimes you feel like you're carrying their load with you as you're supporting them through their journey on, getting well again. And so, my career is quite stressful. I left, mainstream medicine due to just the frustration with it, being up all night. Back then, there were no real regulations to protect physicians from being overworked and abused. And so I left that field, of mainstream medicine, and I went on a more holistic track for my own burnout, right, to resolve it and to prevent it. And so I understand firsthand how important preventing and resolving burnout when it's present is, because I experienced it. And every day I see private clients and online students experiencing burnout. And it's my mission to help them to understand why burnout is affecting them so that they can create their own lives, create their own wellness programs that are customized to them, that address not just the stress, right? Not just relaxation, not just exercise, but really getting down deep into their cells on a mitochondrial level. The mitochondria are the powerhouse of the cell. It's where all of the energy is made that's then going to support the function of the body. One of the functions of the body is to handle stress, right? It's to recover from stress, and it's to continue moving forward through stress. That's a body function, right? It requires trillions and trillions of chemical reactions going on each and every day, day and night, in order for us to endure, if you will, the stress of work, right? The stress of even exercise is a stress, technically speaking. So our body should be capable, conditioned, ready to go under those circumstances to endure the stress, tolerate the stress, benefit from the stress, and recover from the stress. It all starts in the mitochondria, right? The powerhouse of the cell where the energy is actually made. Stress directly damages the mitochondria of the cell. So it directly attacks the metabolism of your cell before you even know what hit you. And this is where we've got to start to pay attention if we really want to resolve burnout for corporations, for individuals, and as a society, and increasingly as a world, right? We're not going to separate ourselves into little silos that we call countries for very much longer, right? We understand that we're all connected. And so what happens in one country trickles into another country, right? We're inseparable, we're all connected. So we're all in this together. And so the solutions are going to be found together on a collaborative level. And treating things metabolically is going to be a huge part of that. Aside from the obvious issues with global pollution, destroying our metabolism, that too is a stressor. But the good news is, if you work on your mitochondria, if you work on determining the root causes of your burnout, you can create a custom wellness program, not a cookie cutter one that you get, with a yoga app or an exercise app that's the same for everybody. This is personalized. This is getting down to the root core of why you, as a particular individual, as part of a team member, as part of a corporation, as part of a country, as part of the world, is experiencing burnout. And once you know your dynamic metabolic type, once you know why you're burnt out on a cellular level, on an energetic level, you're going to be able to get out of that. And until employees address burnout on a metabolic level, they'll stay stuck in poor productivity, brain fog, fatigue, exhaustion, and it just doesn't remain in the workplace. They'll also feel that way at home. When it's time to play with their kids, when it's time to hang out with their partner, when it's time to go out with friends, when it's time to go and do any number of things that they would enjoy doing, they're going to be too exhausted. They're not going to be motivated. They may not even enjoy something that they would otherwise love to do. This is burnout. It's not just a workplace situation. Burnout can severely impact your sleep and make it difficult to sleep, so you can be tired and wired from being burnt out. I hear this all the time. I have clients who come in, they can barely keep their eyes open all day, and it's time to go to bed, and they can't sleep, and their eyes are wide open all night. This is burnout. This is another symptom. Gut issues are another symptom of burnout. Obviously, stress impacts the gut in so many ways that we've talked about so many times on this podcast. But stress essentially suppresses the gastrointestinal system. It suppresses your gut. It suppresses your immune system. makes it more likely for you to catch colds. I see that all the time too. People come in and they say, everything that comes by, I catch it. If it's COVID, I get COVID. If it's rhinovirus, I get that. If it's norovirus, I get that. They're wide open for these infections because these are the impacts of burnout, because it's not just mental, it's not just emotional. It's super important to be able to measure burnout in real time, to know exactly why you're burnt out. And if you're a corporate leader, it's super important for you to know why your team is burnt out or why members of your team may be burnt out. It only takes one team member in burnout to bring the entire team down. Every musical instrument in an orchestra is critical, right? If one instrument is missing, the song doesn't sound the same, right? Same thing for an athletic team, right? We saw LeBron go down the other day, and Lakers aren't quite the same. Just one player down, but the whole team goes down because of that one player going down. The same thing happens every day in corporate America. The same thing happens in families throughout the United States. So if a mother goes down, if a father goes down due to burnout, due to being sick, the whole family goes down, right? Who's taking the kids to their after school activities, who's driving them to school, right? We all experience this all the time. When one member of a family goes down, it takes the whole family with it. And so making sure that each and every team member is running on all cylinders, not just at work, but everywhere, is critical for burnout resolution. Someone who's happy at home is much more likely to be happy at work, and vice versa. And so these are the critical things to start thinking about when we're developing a corporate wellness program that actually works to resolve burnout. So a burnout assessment is a really important starting point to know exactly why you're burnt out. So if you haven't taken our burnout assessment yet, I invite you to visit awakenedwellnessnow.com and take our burnout assessment to determine your dynamic metabolic type. Your dynamic metabolic type tells you exactly why you're burnt out and how to resolve it on a metabolic level. This changes the mitochondria. It helps you to make energy on a cellular level to power your body's functions. This is the key, this is the secret, and this is why corporate wellness programs don't work. They don't have this piece. So once you know your dynamic metabolic type, you can apply it to the 4 pillars of wellness. So pillar number 1 is eat. Nutrition is such an important component of well-being. So the food that the mitochondria get is the starting point for them to make fuel. And so when you eat your food, it's important that it be a balanced diet. And it's important that you eat enough to support the mitochondria so that they can then support your metabolic function. And so in the eat pillar, it's important to know your dynamic metabolic type, because if you're an excess dynamic metabolic type, you don't necessarily need to eat as much as if you are a deficient dynamic metabolic type. So again, there are 6 dynamic metabolic types. They're broadly categorized into excess and deficient. And then they're subcategorized into hot excess, cold excess, temperature neutral excess. And then on the deficient side, we have hot deficient, cold deficient, and temperature neutral deficient. So once you know, again, which of these 6 you are, you know how to handle pillar number 1. So if you are an excess dynamic metabolic type, the reason you're burnt out, the reason your mitochondria are not supporting your metabolism is because they're full of toxins and inflammation. And so this is important to know because toxins and inflammation damage mitochondria. The other really critical thing that are hanging out in mitochondria are genes. And so the environment inside of the mitochondria matter. How many toxins, how much inflammation are present inside of your mitochondria dictate what genes get turned on and don't get turned on. And this is what then characterizes how your cell behaves. So the behavior of your cell depends on the shape and condition of your mitochondria, which depends on your nutrition, pillar number 1, among other pillars, which we'll get to shortly. So if you're an excess dynamic metabolic type, you want to get that garbage out of your mitochondria, right? So again, you're in excess, not because you have extra energy, not because your mitochondria are cranking out more energy than they need, but because they're bogged down with toxins and inflammation that they don't need. So there's extra energy. Everything ultimately is energy. And so there's energy that favors the mitochondrial function, and then there's energy that does not favor mitochondrial function. And so if you're excess, you need to mobilize those toxins and that inflammation and get rid of it, right? And so if you're a hot excess, you can do that through a raw vegan diet, for example. You can do that through increasing green strengths with raw vegetables. Vegetables that have a lot of water in them are super alkaline. So when someone is a hot excess dynamic metabolic type, that means, yeah, I'm full of inflammation, I have a bunch of toxins in my body, bogging down my mitochondria, making it super hard for them to make energy for me. But I'm also acidic at the same time. That's what hot means. Hot means there's acids being produced because the energy is not being properly made because of all the toxins and inflammation. So again, remember there's this backup system. If your mitochondria can't function properly, there's actually a backup system in your body to continue to make energy for you despite the mitochondria not working well. The problem with that backup system is it only makes 1/18 the amount of energy. 1/18, 1/8. So 1/18 of the energy. So it makes 2 units of ATP, or adenosine triphosphate, which is the main currency of the body, to exchange for function, as opposed to 36 units of energy for every gram of sugar or glucose that the cell gets. And so it's a huge difference whether or not your energy is made in your mitochondria or outside of your mitochondria. So that backup system is there just to keep you alive. It's not there to be used all the time. When you're stressed out and when you have a lot of toxins and inflammation, you have an excess dynamic metabolic type, your body starts cranking out acids. And if your liver and the other detox systems in your body can't get rid of that acid and keep up with the pace, you're going to become acidic, hence the hot excess dynamic metabolic type. So to flush all of that out, you can do a raw vegan diet. You can also do intermittent fasting, right? Things that are draining. We're looking to get rid of the excess inflammation and toxins that are in the body, and we're looking to neutralize the acids in the case of a hot excess dynamic metabolic type. And so alkaline foods are foods that have a lot of water in them. Lettuce, celery, cucumber, lemons. These are things that inside of you become alkaline. So while a lemon is acidic on the outside, it becomes alkaline on the inside once it's digested. And so these are strategies: lemon in your water, cucumber water, lots of salads, green drinks. Things that are bland and boring tend to be alkaline as well. So green tea, dandelion tea, peppermint tea, matcha. These are things that are a little bit on the bland side, but they're very alkalinizing. So if you have a hot, excess dynamic metabolic type, these are the strategies that can drain those toxins and that inflammation out, clearing out your mitochondria, clearing the way for them to start cranking out energy again, start cranking out that ATP. So now you get 36 units of ATP instead of 2. And so obviously that's a huge amount more energy, and that's how you resolve burnout in the face of a hot excess dynamic metabolic type. Now, if you're a cold excess dynamic metabolic type for pillar number 1, you want to warm yourself up and get rid of the toxins. So if we zone in on the mitochondria, what's happening there is they're still full of inflammation and they're still full of toxins, but it's a cold inflammatory process. It's not acidic in the case of a cold dynamic metabolic type. So a cold excess dynamic metabolic type will report feeling colder than most other people. And this, or they'll even have a body temperature that's too low, below 98.6. And so this is how you know that you're cold. You know that you're excess because you feel better when you move around. You feel worse when you sit still. Exercising makes you feel better. These are all things that force those toxins and that inflammation to move around, and this is why you feel better and know that you're an excess dynamic metabolic type. So now if you're a cold excess, you want to have warm, well-cooked, slightly spicy food. You can still do a vegan diet, but make sure everything is cooked warm and spicy and not very much on the raw side, because you don't want to make something that's already too cold even colder. Food, frozen food, uncooked food, Things that are right out of the fridge are cold, so they're going to make you colder, and that's actually going to make you more inflamed and more toxic because it's going to slow your metabolism down. And so this is a strategy for pillar number one for a cold excess dynamic metabolic type. You can still do the intermittent fasting, right? Because that's draining. And if you're temperature neutral, you kind of play in both worlds, right? You can have some cooked stuff that's hot and spicy, and you can have some raw things. The emphasis there, though, is to make sure that you're mixing it up in terms of alkaline foods, things that are cold and raw versus things that are hot and spicy, but you're still draining the system out. So intermittent fasting is a pretty good tool to be used here in a temperature neutral dynamic metabolic type. So in order to drain out that inflammation and those toxins from your system. You don't need to eat, quite as much if you have an excess dynamic metabolic type, because you're trying to unload, trying to get rid of things you don't want to have hanging around in your mitochondria inside of your cells. And so that's the excess. Now, if you're deficient, right? So if you're a hot deficient dynamic metabolic type, how do you know you're deficient? When you take the burnout assessment, you might start out pretty tired in the morning, and then it just gets worse from there, right? You need to drink your coffee to keep yourself going. You're the one that, if you could take a nap, would feel much better when you woke up. You're the one that might not work out very much because you're too tired to work out. You're the one that might say, yeah, force myself to work out, but then I know I pay for it later. I feel tired later, or I feel, worse the following day. Or I have to slow it down so much, I can't really do what I used to do. That's how you know that you're a deficient dynamic metabolic type, right? So now if you're a hot deficient, no fasting, right? You do not want a draining diet strategy here, because what's going on in your mitochondria is that it's missing key things that it needs to make energy. So you may be missing vitamins, minerals, proteins, fats, even oxygen, believe it or not, can be missing from the mitochondria if you're shallow breathing too much. So people that tend to be burnt out and stressed tend to naturally just shallow breathe because the body is sending a distress signal, and that creates a fight or flight response, which is shallow breathing. And so there are pockets in your body, mitochondria deep inside kind of the cracks and crevices of your body, or the places that your body doesn't deem to be as important for survival: hair follicles, skin cells, the musculoskeletal system. Although we use it to run from a predator, we only use very specific muscles when we run from a predator that do not actually use oxygen. They're the sprinting muscles. They don't use as much oxygen, so they don't depend on oxygen as much. The white fibers in our muscles rely on oxygen. They're more aerobic in their function. They're not critical for survival. And so if you're shallow breathing more than you should be, there are places in your musculoskeletal system that will not get enough oxygen. And if you don't have enough oxygen, you can't make energy with your mitochondria, because your mitochondria involves the need for oxygen to make that energy. So it needs the food that you ate and the oxygen that you take in, mixes all that up and creates that ATP from it. Again, with oxygen inside your mitochondria, you can make 36 units for every gram of sugar or glucose. Without oxygen, it doesn't happen in the mitochondria. It happens outside in the cytoplasm of the cell. And again, you can only make 2 units for every gram of glucose instead of 36. So you're making a fraction of the energy if you don't have enough equipment in the mitochondria to make that energy. And so vitamin and mineral deficiencies are really critical here. Hormone deficiencies as well. The mitochondria relies on hormones to know what to do and how to do it. And so these are all things that are going to create a deficient dynamic metabolic type at the level of your cells. And so these things need to be replaced. So you don't want to drain out something that's already depleted and deficient. So here you want to have small, frequent meals. You don't want to fast. You don't want to do anything that's draining. So now if you're a hot deficient, yes, you can have some raw food, and alkaline food is going to be really important for you, but you want to make sure that you're having small, frequent meals and not fasting. You want to have snacks in between your meals that are very, very healthy, that contain healthy proteins. You can have, even now, again, jerkies and things like that. Even organic cold cuts are fine to have as a snack in between your meals. Your body is really great at using protein for fuel. So you don't have to overeat on carbs and risk, weight gain or anything like that. Eating protein really does not cause weight gain. And if you eat the right type of protein, clean proteins, you won't get a lot of inflammation from that either. And so making sure that you're having frequent meals, eating approximately every 3 hours, breakfast, lunch, dinner, snacks in between, small snacks. They don't have to be like excessive calories. You're still eating the same number of calories for the day, you're just spreading them out. Why is that important? Because when you're depleted, the body needs to be fed consistently so that it gets what it needs all the time so that it can make the energy to support what you're doing. So if you're fasting throughout the day and you're a deficient dynamic metabolic type, you're going to burn yourself out even more because you're not powering the most active part of your day, right? Most of us work during daylight hours, right? Unless we work night shifts. And so if we're fasting during those critical times, we're actually giving our mitochondria less and less and less food to make energy out of. And it's a myth that it's okay if you eat later. We're not designed to eat later. We're not designed to eat very late. So if you're eating a huge number of calories to make up for having fasted all day, your body is going to be really sluggish at digesting that food because that's not when it's designed to digest food. Later in the day, your body is getting ready to detox, remove toxins from itself, as you're winding down and getting ready to go to bed. So if your gastrointestinal system is bogged down, if digestion and absorption is taking up all your resources at that time, you're not going to start your detoxification processes off properly, and you're going to pay for it later. And you're going to get more and more burnt out. And so this is why fasting is not appropriate for people that have a deficient dynamic metabolic type. And so again, if you're a hot excess dynamic metabolic type, eat alkaline foods. You can have salads, you can have greens, drinks, but again, make sure you're eating consistent meals throughout the day. Again, don't increase your calories, just spread them out. So that way, the mitochondria are cranking all day. And also, they're used at night to detox you, right? Just because your body's asleep, I should rephrase that. Just because you're asleep doesn't mean your body's asleep. Your body is working 24/7, right? So it detoxes and restores you all night long. The mitochondria are still cranking out, making energy during that time to support those functions throughout the night. And so making sure that your mitochondria are flowing, firing on all cylinders is the key to resolving burnout. And so if you're a cold deficient dynamic metabolic type, now you don't want the raw food, you don't want the alkaline food, because your issue is that you're too alkaline, right? There is such a thing as being too alkaline. And so you don't want to go over the other side of the mountain and make yourself too cold or too alkaline. And so you want to make sure that you're eating warm, well-cooked food if you're a cold deficient dynamic metabolic type. So the same thing applies. You want those small, frequent meals with your snacks in between. Again, not increasing your calories, but just spreading them out. And you want to make sure that that food is well cooked, spicy. So cinnamon, nutmeg, fennel, what else? Ginger, turmeric, curry, garlic, onion, black pepper, cayenne pepper, jalapeno. Again, your mouth doesn't have to be on fire. It just needs to be comfort food, right? It's warm. Everything is warm, well cooked. So you want some spicier beverages. Not that you can't have a greens drink and some matcha here and there, no problem, but don't make it a staple, right? Also mix it up. Have some chai tea and things that are more warming. Hibiscus tea is also warming. So you want to make sure that you're warming the body so that you're getting rid of that coldness. When you're too cold and you warm your body up, you're speeding up your metabolism. You're making it you're making your mitochondria much more efficient at making energy. And so you're going to get yourself out of burnout by leveling your body temperature. You don't want it to be 97, you don't want it to be 96, right? Even if that's how it's been your whole life, it's not normal. Just because that's what you've experienced doesn't mean it's normal. 98.6 is normal. Anything that deviates from that isn't normal. unless, you're acutely ill, right? If you have the flu, we expect you to have a fever, right? So having a temperature of 101 when you have the flu is an appropriate response. But you don't want to be at 97 degrees as a baseline, right? That's not a healthy place to be. You want to make sure your temperature goes up. And food is one of the best strategies to do that. What you put into your body that keeps your body warm is going to increase your temperature. And so if you're a temperature neutral deficient, again, you want to kind of swim in and out of both worlds. You have some, raw alkaline food. You have some warm, well-cooked, spicier food. You're kind of mixing it up. And you're still having small, frequent meals, snacks in between, not eating more calories, just spreading them out, right? It's the same thing. No fasting, nothing that's going to drain your depleted energy, right? You want to save your energy, like it's gold. You don't want to give it away. And so this is pillar number 1. The next step in the 4-pillar fix is move. And so here, again, with corporate wellness programs, they tend to kind of have a one-size-fits-all solution to exercise. They give you a gym membership, and then they leave it up to you as to what you want to do, right? And while having the choice is great, knowing what is going to benefit you versus harm you is really critical for resolving burnout. And again, corporate wellness programs don't look at these things. They don't personalize the corporate wellness program for each individual so that each individual knows, hey, what's going to harm my metabolism versus what's going to help my metabolism. So here, again, if you're an excess dynamic metabolic type, again, you've got all this junk in your cells, in your mitochondria that you want to drain out. So for you, after you've been, appropriately cleared, always seek, a clearance from your physician before you do any exercise regimen. But for you, you're going to benefit more from a high-intensity interval training program, right? So you're the one who can do the HIIT program. You're the one who can do, the mini triathlon. You're the one that can run long distance, although I don't highly recommend that for most women to do long term. But, short term, if you want to train for a mini marathon or something like that, that would be great because it's very draining. And so these are the types of exercises that are going to help. Now, the move pillar in terms of temperature, right? So if you're a hot excess dynamic metabolic type, don't do hot yoga. Don't go in a hot room if you're already too hot, because that's going to basically singe you from the inside out, right? It's going to make that acidity worse. It's going to make it more and more drying, and your mitochondria can't function when there's too much acid in them. And acid is it's hot, it burns, it dries. And so this is something that impacts metabolism, because if your cells are not properly hydrated, they can't function properly. And so it's really important not to make a hot dynamic metabolic type hotter. So you want to be very careful with things like sauna rooms, things like that. You want to be cautious that you're not bringing in too much heat into a system that's already too hot. So you may benefit even from a short term of cryotherapy if you're hot. That may be a good, adjunct to your exercise, and that can help to reverse burnout if you're a hot excess dynamic metabolic type. Now, of course, when you're moving around and you're doing high intensity, you're going to get hot, right? But you don't want to be doing it in a room that's already too hot. You don't want to be doing it under infrared heat lamp where you're just going to get hotter and hotter. You want to be very careful that if it's the middle of the summer, you're not out playing 3 hours of tennis in the scorching heat when you're a hot dynamic metabolic type, right? So you want to be very balanced there. If you can find an indoor, tennis facility or an indoor gym where the temperature is air conditioned during the summer, that would be very helpful if you're a hot dynamic metabolic type, excess in this case. If you're a cold excess dynamic metabolic type, then hot yoga is phenomenal for you, right? It's going to balance that coldness and level out your body temperature, and it's going to drain you because you sweat a lot during hot yoga. Infrared saunas are great here too, right? Because they cause you to sweat, and they warm up that coldness. They raise your body temperature to make your mitochondria function more and more optimally, to make crank out that energy so that it can exchange it for that body function, and that's how you get yourself out of burnout there. You want to be careful if you have a cold dynamic metabolic type that you're not in cold environments, right? So you do not want to do cryotherapy if you're a cold dynamic metabolic type, right? You don't want to do ice baths if you're a cold dynamic metabolic type. Whether you're excess or deficient doesn't matter so much as it does that you are cold. So you don't want to make yourself colder. So these are things to just bear in mind. Now, if you're a temperature neutral excess dynamic metabolic type, still you can do the high intensity stuff. You can do the mini triathlons. You can do, the P90X programs and the spin classes and all the things that are high intensity and draining. Those are fine. And you can, again, swim in both worlds. So if you want to do hot yoga a couple days a week and, go and do something else in a more, temperate or, colder space, you can do that. People with temperature neutral dynamic metabolic types have that buffer where they're not quite as temperature sensitive. And so it doesn't quite matter as much the climate that you're in as it does for people that are hot or cold excess. And so for deficient dynamic metabolic types, you do not want to drain yourself out. And so for you, you don't want to do the high intensity stuff. You don't want to do the triathlons and the marathons and the spin classes and the boot camps. Like, you want to be very cautious not to do those things if you're a deficient dynamic metabolic type. And again, this is what a lot of corporate wellness programs get wrong, is they give everyone the same cookie cutter workouts to do, or they give them options and don't guide them to match their metabolism to the activities, and they actually don't ever fix the burnout. So again, a deficient dynamic metabolic type, if you are a hot deficient, you want to be very restorative with your exercises. And so you want to be in a temperature that's neutral. If you're in a cooler temperature, that's okay. But again, make sure you stretch and warm up your body so that you don't sprain your muscles or injure yourself in a colder climate as a hot deficient dynamic metabolic type. Again, you do not want to be in hot climates, and so hot yoga is not your thing, right? You want to be more restorative if you're a deficient dynamic metabolic type. So again, remember, the issue is that my mitochondria can't keep up with my demand, and I have this supply-demand mismatch where I can't meet the demand. The supply is not meeting the demand, and I have this gap, and that's why I'm burnt out, because I'm missing things inside of my cells, whether they be vitamins or minerals or hormones or proteins or fats or oxygen. I'm missing things. And so I need to be more restorative as a deficient dynamic metabolic type. And so things that are restorative are breath work. Again, everyone can use breath work. But if you're a deficient dynamic metabolic type, whether it's hot, cold, or temperature neutral, breath work is even more important for you, because you're driving oxygen into the cells that are not getting oxygen when you're shallow breathing all the time. And so now you're getting oxygen into the mitochondria. And remember, when you get oxygen into your mitochondria, you make 36 units of energy, or ATP, for every gram of sugar, as opposed to 2 when you don't get enough oxygen in the mitochondria. And so this has to do directly with your breathing and the pattern of breathing. And so doing breath work a few times a day, 3 times a day for 3 minutes, is what the Institute of Heart Math has shown in studies is quite beneficial. So it's 5-second inhale, 5-second exhale through the nostrils, never through the mouth, and you never hold your breath. And it's for 3 minutes, 3 times a day. Extremely restorative. Another really restorative thing to do is yoga, like yin yoga, like kind of the stretchy type of yoga where your majority is stretching, you're holding poses, you're doing a lot of breath work. This is the type of yoga that's going to be restorative. In other words, you're kind of stealing energy from the environment and bringing it into yourself, as opposed to expending the energy. So Tai Chi and Qigong are moving meditations, and they are phenomenal for being restorative, restoring your energy, because it allows you to move, but also harness and make energy. And so Qigong and Tai Chi harness Qi. They literally help you make more energy through the breath work and the stretching and the slow rhythmic flow of motion. You're actually making energy and you're stealing it from the environment, because when you breathe, you're stealing energy from the environment to make more energy in your body. And so these are highly restorative exercises that I recommend to all of my deficient dynamic metabolic types, whether they are hot, cold, or temperature neutral. Again, the temperature only matters for the environment that you're doing the exercise in. So again, you don't want to be in a hot yoga room doing yin yoga. Like it's not going to help you. If you're a hot dynamic metabolic type, it's going to make you worse. So you want to make sure that you're in an air-conditioned climate where the temperature is not too hot, not too cold, right? You want to find that Goldilocks zone. If you're a cold deficient dynamic metabolic type, then yeah, you can sit in a hot room, but don't do draining yoga. Make sure that you're doing restorative yoga. So that way you're increasing your body temperature and you're doing something restorative at the same time, where a lot of the emphasis is on stretching and breath work. That's the key to restoring your energy. And so what else can you do, right? You can do all kinds of other things that you love to do. You can, shoot some baskets, play some basketball, but again, you don't want to be running hard because you don't want to drain yourself out. You can play pickleball, you can play tennis, but just make sure that you're not, again, draining yourself out. You don't want to play for hours. Maybe you play for 30 minutes, or if you're playing for, an hour or more, do it at a pace where you're resting and you're catching your breath. You're not, you're not outpacing what your body can do, because even though you might be able to muster the strength to do the set of, the tennis set, you don't want to pay for it later, right? Because your body is having to steal energy from other systems to keep you going on the tennis court, or to keep you going on the basketball court, right? Or to keep you going doing your long distance running. So you want to be very measured with your exercise. So you can do power walking instead of running. If you like to swim, you can swim. You can rollerblade. You can skateboard. You can strength train, right? Strength training is very consolidating. It actually helps you to build your energy. Again, just make sure that you're breathing through your sets, you're stretching in between, you're warming up, and you are, building muscle mass, but you're not draining yourself doing it. So you're lifting heavy enough that you can do 12, repetitions of an exercise, but on that 12th one, you're feeling the burn, and then rest for like 2 minutes between your sets, to make sure that you're not wearing yourself out. So these are the strategies that you can employ if you are a deficient dynamic metabolic type for pillar number 2. Pillar number 3, sleep. This is a big one. And again, most corporate wellness programs don't address this at all. Sleep is not a, one-size-fits-all issue. Not everyone can get, restful sleep. There may be some metabolic issues, again, that are driving poor sleep. And, looking at why someone is not sleeping well, or why they're not feeling recovered despite getting an appropriate amount of sleep, is critically important. And knowing your dynamic metabolic type helps you to determine this. And, generally speaking, for an excess dynamic metabolic type, they don't need as much sleep as someone who has a deficient dynamic metabolic type. So whether you're hot or cold or temperature neutral doesn't quite matter as much here. What matters is whether you're an excess or a deficient dynamic metabolic type, and also your biological gender. And so if you are a biological male and you have an excess dynamic metabolic type, we recommend 7 hours of sleep. Now that's 7 hours of pretty solid sleep. So if you're having trouble and you're waking up, or you're having trouble falling asleep, these are things that we want to work on to make sure that you are able to fall asleep properly. Very often, working on pillar number 1 and pillar number 2 and doing some breath work will actually help you sleep better and fall asleep sooner and get a more restful, deeper level of sleep. And so very often these things start to kind of fix themselves as you're working through the pillars in a customized way by knowing your dynamic metabolic type. So if you're a biological male and you are an excess dynamic metabolic type, you need 7 hours of solid sleep. If you are a biological female with an excess dynamic metabolic type, you need 8 hours of sleep. Now, these numbers are based in traditional Chinese medicine theory, and they are the amount of sleep that is necessary just for maintenance. And so if you are a deficient dynamic metabolic type, you actually need to add 1 hour to that on a consistent basis. And people always ask, well, how long do I need to add this hour for? And that's trickier to answer, right? The reason we don't ever catch up on our sleep is because we don't have proper sleep hygiene long enough that the body can really actually recover over time from that lost sleep. And so it is possible to catch up with sleep. It has to be consistent and for at least months, if not years. So if you're the one that always gets like 5 hours of sleep because either you can't sleep or your pets are waking you up or you're stressed out or whatever the case, you wake up a lot, you have to go to the bathroom a bunch, you're having night sweats, hot flashes, for you to catch up on sleep is going to take a lot longer than for someone who has only been, a little sleep deprived for a month because they had a deadline that they had to meet, or, maybe they were sick for a little while and they weren't sleeping well. But now, they're back on track. And so that person will obviously not need to catch up for as long as someone who has, a chronic sleep deprivation. So if you're super deprived of sleep and that's been going on for a long time, like years, you may need to do this for at least a year, right? Now that doesn't mean you have to wait a year to get out of burnout, right? Most of the time, once you know your dynamic metabolic type and you apply that to the 4 pillars of wellness, you're already getting yourself out of burnout within 3 weeks. Some people, it's within 1 week. Just first week of lessons that we do have some people say like, wow, I'm already feeling better, right? Why? Because their mindset is in the game, right? Mindset is huge. Now, by itself, that doesn't always, cover everything. We need to do the rest of the lessons and make sure that all the pillars are being addressed, right? But it's a great starting point to feel really good really soon. So the strategies are, we start having you feel better pretty soon, but you need, in order to maintain and to get gains from that so that you're actually out of burnout, not just because you feel better, but because you are better, like deep down in your cells at the mitochondrial level, those mitochondria are actually functioning better. It's not just that, they got a little oxygen on a Monday and you started to feel better. It's consistent, right? You've got pillars going and they're starting to really fire on all cylinders because now they don't have as many toxins, they don't have as much inflammation, they're getting fed, they're getting oxygen. They can just crank out energy much more effortlessly than they could before, right? And so this is like the deep metabolic solution that we need with burnout prevention. So it has to do with just more than just, getting a couple good nights sleep. It's a pattern, it's a lifestyle, that needs to be instilled. And people will say, yeah, but I lose the time, I've got all this other stuff to do all day. Like, how am I supposed to get an extra hour of sleep? You'd be amazed at how much more efficient you become when you're not in burnout. And so things that are taking you hours to do now will take you an hour to do later, right? It won't take you 2 and 3 hours to do things. It'll take you an hour to do things. Or something that might take you 15 minutes if you were thinking clearly and didn't have brain fog, that is now taking you 45 minutes to do. You'll be able to do it in 15 again, right? So you literally buy back time when you become more efficient and you actually follow the pillars and the recommendations. And so, the days get a little bit longer in a good way because you're actually much more clear about how to do things, the steps in which you want to do them, and it's amazing how much more clarity people have, and they just get, as they say, they get shit done. And so these are the recommendations for sleep. And the last segment is detox, pillar number 4. We did an entire podcast on this last week, so I recommend that you go back and listen to it if you missed it. We had a great discussion on detoxification, which is so important now because, unfortunately, we're getting inundated with toxins, and with regulations being increasingly relaxed, it's just going to get worse. And so knowing exactly how to employ pillar number 4 for your dynamic metabolic type is critical. It's really important to understand, like, how do I get toxins out of my body, right? And so go back and listen to that podcast. It'll be really informative so that you know exactly, hey, I'm a hot excess. What do I do for detoxification? We outlined the whole thing in the podcast for all the dynamic metabolic types. The critical thing to know here is that even if you're a deficient dynamic metabolic type, that doesn't mean you don't have toxins. It just means that your primary issue is deficiency, a deficient dynamic metabolic type. Doesn't mean you also don't have toxins, right? Because if your detox systems, if inside of your liver cells, for example, the mitochondria are depleted and deficient, and they can't detox as efficiently, yeah, you're going to pile up toxins and inflammation. But it's not going to be your primary problem. And so for that reason, if you're a deficient dynamic metabolic type, you don't want to do a draining detox program. You want to build your body up so that it detoxes for you. And you want to do that under careful guidance. So you don't want to drain the body if it's in a deficient dynamic metabolic type state. But you can still remove toxins by filling in the gaps of what's missing, right? Again, using the eat pillar, the move pillar where you're doing restorative exercises, the sleep pillar where you're getting enough sleep. That cranks the detoxification systems and that gets them moving and going so that toxins are just naturally removed from your body. Now, again, you want to be careful that you don't have heavy metals. The body is not as well equipped to deal with heavy metals. And so that requires specific testing, which we covered in the podcasts for last week, episode 8. So that requires special testing, special treatment. So again, I highly encourage you to listen to podcast episode 8 if you haven't already. And so that's the 4-pillar fix, using your dynamic metabolic types. And these are things that corporate wellness programs just do not address. They don't look at these things. And if you don't have a comprehensive, personalized, customized solution, you're going to miss the boat and you're going to stay in burnout. And your team, will suffer for it. And at the end of the day, the productivity of your business will also unfortunately suffer. And of course, that means lower profits, increased cost of doing business, and all the things that, all of the corporate leaders know and understand happened in the face of burnout. And many corporate leaders understand all these statistics that I went over today. Like, they know them like the back of their hand, but they don't have a solution, right? The solution is a personalized wellness program, a burnout solution that is, custom made for each individual team member. And what's empowering about it is you get to do it yourself, right? Of course, we guide you through our program with live lessons and live Q&As and support. But it's empowering to know that, hey, I get to know why I'm burnt out. Like, I get to understand what's going on a metabolic level in my body so that I can create a program that is going to suit me. I know ahead of time what's going to actually get me out of burnout, and I don't have to do this trial and error and hitting a brick wall everywhere I turn for forever, potentially, for some people. I've had people who have been looking for 20 years for solutions, and they just don't get them until it's personalized to them. And so this is what we do. This is what I've been doing for at least 15 years now, and we now have our corporate burnout solutions ready and in place and helping people, and I hope to be able to share these solutions with you further. So I'd love to share the story about one of our earlier students. She was one of our first Wellness Warriors in our Wellness Warrior 9-week transformation program. When she joined our program, she was exhausted, and frankly, even during our discovery call, she was crying. She was in tears because she had been looking for so long for a solution for her burnout. Her and her husband were getting ready to open up a real estate agency. She was excited. They had been planning for this. They wanted to have kids. They were newly married. And they had all of these dreams and all of these plans, and she was just exhausted. And rather than being thrilled about the plans, they actually terrified her. She was afraid of having children. She was afraid of launching this business because she just didn't know how she would make it through, all the day-to-day things that she would have to do. And so she was literally in tears when we spoke because she just didn't know where to turn or what to do. So when we coached her through doing the burnout assessment, she determined that she was a cold deficient dynamic metabolic type. And what she quickly realized is that she was doing all the wrong things to try to fix her burnout. So she had tried a raw vegan diet before, but because she was a cold deficient dynamic metabolic type, she was literally making herself worse in all the possible ways. She was making herself colder, and she was making herself more depleted because vegan diets tend to be draining. And so, she was just feeling worse and worse and worse. She was, trying to force herself to exercise to the point where she couldn't exercise anymore. And so now she was able to realize, like, oh, I've been a cold deficient dynamic metabolic type. No wonder forcing myself to exercise was actually making me worse, right? And she was skipping meals, right? She wasn't hungry in the morning, which is a huge problem for people that have deficient dynamic metabolic types. And for people who do intermittent fasting, who are actually damaging their metabolism. So not having an appetite in the morning is a huge warning sign that your metabolism is damaged, that your mitochondria can't make enough energy. And we've spoken about that on other podcasts, but the short answer to that is when your body thinks it's starving and it's not going to get food, it stops asking. And so when the metabolism is so damaged that it's not able to, power its functions, it will set itself low. It'll literally turn off non-essential functions, just hang out wherever it can to make the supply meet the demand. And so it's making two wrongs equal a right. So it shuts down your appetite. And people think that that means that their intermittent fasting must be working, but it's the exact opposite. And so, this young lady was not having an appetite in the morning and skipping breakfast because she was deficient and depleted, and her metabolism was literally not bothering to ask for food anymore because it was broken. And so we asked her to do all the things we just talked about. We applied that cold dynamic metabolic type to the 4 pillars of wellness. So she was eating warm, well-cooked foods, not fasting anymore. She was eating small, frequent meals with snacks in between, not overeating, just spreading out her calories. She was doing restorative exercises. We taught her breath work, in our live classes. We taught her the restorative exercises that would benefit her. And then no cleanses, no detoxes, no fasting, 9 hours of sleep, right? Because she's a biological female. And within 3 weeks, she was out of burnout, and she was thrilled, right? And by the end of the program, she was starting her business with her husband, and hopping on calls, doing all the things, right? Everybody knows well, not everybody, but anyone who's had a startup knows the challenges of a startup. It's night and day. It's like you're constantly doing things. And so she was thrilled that she was able to do these things. Of course, we had to kind of rein her back, right? Make sure that she was still following these pillars so that she wouldn't crash and burn, right? So also taught her that, like, how do you maintain the gain, right? Like, how do you keep it going so that you don't crash again? And so that was one of my favorite stories because, my earlier students and of course, all of my clients are near and dear to my heart. But, she jumped in when we had first offered this solution, and she trusted. And so I'll forever be grateful for that. So if you are an HR leader or manager or business executive or business owner, and you'd love to do our corporate burnout risk assessment tool, I invite you to visit our website, awakenedwellnessnow.com. I'm happy to hop on a call with you after you've completed your form and we have your burnout score. Happy to hop on a call and to help you know what solutions would best work for you and your team so that you can reduce burnout and help your company and all of your team members to thrive. So I hope you found this podcast useful. And if you're just an individual and you just want to resolve burnout for yourself, I invite you to go to our website as well, awakenedwellnessnow.com, and download our Wellness Warrior Burnout Assessment so you can know your dynamic metabolic type so you can get started right now. So we give you all types of tips and tricks, and of course you can listen to our previous podcasts to kind of help you move through. If you want a more personalized approach, we do offer the Wellness Warrior 9-week transformation program. It's a 9-week course where we walk you through step by step how to create your own personalized wellness program to beat burnout for good. And of course, we've just launched our corporate burnout resolution solutions and prevention programs. And so thanks for listening. Please like, share, and subscribe to our channel. Thrilled to be here, providing you with burnout solutions to help keep you and your family and your company vibrantly healthy, joyful, and happy. Thanks for listening, and until next time, many blessings.